What's going on, reefers? Blaine here. As you can see, back in the farm again, and today we're going to be talking about a group of corals I've really grown to appreciate over the past year or so that I've been here at Top Shelf Aquatics. We're going to be talking about flower pot corals. Now today we're going to be talking about the big three that kind of includes everything together in the flower pot coral group. We're going to be talking about Goniopora, Alveopora, and Bernardipora. These are three that we actively aquaculture here at Top Shelf Aquatics. We're gonna do what we normally do in these coral spotlight videos. We're gonna walk around, we're gonna highlight some of our favorites from Top Shelf Aquatics. We'll get into some of the care requirements and needs that these corals have in your tanks at home. Let's go ahead and get right into it and start talking about the big three from flower pot corals. Let's dive in. A recurring thought that we've mentioned in a lot of our videos here in the farm, and due to a lot of time of the hobby being around, science being implemented, but a lot of these corals have all been thought to be grouped together in one single group. Today we're talking about three that are in the flower pot coral group, but Goniopora and Bernardipora are going to be a little bit more similar, whereas Alveopora is completely different. But all of these corals are going to have very similar care requirements and why they're going to be all grouped together into the flower pot coral group. Over the course of time, and from my understanding from a lot of people here at the Top Shelf Farm, it's due to the fact that a lot of the species that originally were imported into the States were some of the more difficult species to keep because they were kept in such shallow and turbid environments, and the species that we are now bringing in and actively aquaculturing are some of the species that are going to be a lot more ready to be able to adapt to the aquarium situation. So that is definitely something to recognize, but obviously as well, we've made a lot of changes and progression when it comes to the hobby in general, what we've been able to do for the corals and all these animals and what we're able to provide to them. But overall though, Goniopora, Alveopora, and Bernardipora over the course of time originally were very hard to keep in our aquariums at home and now have become much more easy to keep. And obviously here at Top Shelf Aquatics, you guys are gonna see all the different species and strains we're actively keeping and growing. You can see them behind me. It's really easy for us now, and it can be easy for you too at home. To kick things off, let's start talking about Goniopora and how we can distinguish them from their counterparts. Now, when we're talking about Bernardipora and we're talking about Alveopora, they only have a couple species that they're gonna have that are actively here in the hobby right now and that are being actively aquacultured as well. When Gonies come up in the conversation, we are talking about a lot of different species that are grouping together underneath Goniopora that we are actively aquaculturing and that are available in the aquarium hobby. Another thing to mention too as well is Gonioporas are going to be widely known for their wide variation of colors, whereas there may only be a couple of different color variants in the other counterparts. In Gonies, there's going to be a ton of different colors, whether it be the highlighter greens, whether it's the pinks, the reds, the blues. There is a huge variation of color, and so that's something to help distinguish Gonies. One fairly easy trick to tell as well whether a coral is a Goniopora or an Alveopora is by the number of tentacles on each polyp. Gonies will have 18 to 24 tentacles, whereas Alveopora will only have about 12 tentacles on each polyp. So if there's more than you can technically count, you're probably dealing with a Goniopora rather than an Alveopora. That'll be one of those things, the easiest way for most hobbyists to tell these corals apart. Next on our list from the big three, we're going to be talking about Bernardipora. Right next to me is a nice colony of the TSA Laffy Taffy, and we're going to be talking about three main things to help distinguish Bernardipora from the other two flower pot corals. The first being when they are frags, and even as they grow out, but mainly in the frag size, the polyps stay real tight and do not extend out to any crazy amount and stay pretty short. Secondly, a tip I grabbed from Jake Adams many years ago is that Goniopora, you will see the tentacles will be much more rounded at the tip, whereas in Bernardiporas, the tentacles come to a much more pointed tip. They can have a roundish form to them like Gonies, but Gonies are a lot more globby when it comes to showcasing their tentacles. Third and lastly, something we've noticed in the farm and something we've seen as well in Euphilia is that Bernardipora will sting Goniopora if they're next to one another as they get bigger. So if you see some coral warfare potentially happening in your flower pot garden, it may have been you thought they were only Gonies, but there could potentially be a Bernardipora mixed in with the bunch. Another thing to remember too is that Bernardiporas are known to be encrusters, so once these take off, they'll work their way through the rockwork outwards by encrusting. All right, last but not least in our flower pot coral selection, we're gonna be talking about the third group of corals. Let's start getting to know a little bit better Alveoporas. This is gonna be one of the flower pot corals that when you're looking at the polyps, they truly put out the closest resemblance of what actual flowers look like. In the early years of the hobby, Alveopora was thought to be Goniopora, but like most things, as I said earlier, scientific development has now led us to understanding these corals a little bit better. And fun fact, they're actually closer related to Monopora than they actually are Goniopora. So something interesting to see in our reef tanks as well. Now we have a better understanding of the overarching group of flower pot corals. We've met Goniopora, we've met Bernardipora, we've also met Alveopora. Let's get to know a little bit about the care requirements of keeping these corals happy in our systems at home. I mentioned it earlier. Even though these corals are different, their care requirements are gonna be very similar. So all these are gonna be the same when it comes to the care requirements in between all three of the different flower pot corals. Let's go ahead and dive into the details. When it comes to the lighting for these corals, we see them to do well in medium levels of light at roughly 100 to 200 par. Like most corals though, when we're adding them into a system, we recommend to start them low and then work their way up into more light. Most will say that these corals do better also in a higher nutrient-rich system. Naturally, they're found in fairly turbid areas in the wild, so they're gonna be getting multiple feedings throughout the course of the day. So in our reef tanks, we wanna kinda emulate that, and so having a higher nutrient system is gonna be the solution for when it comes to feeding these gonies. People will also mention too that having good levels of manganese, maintaining high feedings is gonna help as well with the long-term success of keeping flower pot corals. When it comes to the size of food we're giving these corals, we're gonna be talking about very small particulates in the water column. They're not gonna be eating really big pieces of food. They're gonna be wanting extremely fine food products. Another thing to mention as well with these corals is they have an extremely porous skeletal structure. They're actually some of the lightest corals we're gonna have in our hobby. Now with their calcium skeleton, it's super important to make sure that your calcium levels, your alkalinity levels are gonna be staying really up to date and on level so that they can maintain growing and heading in the right direction. Due to the fact that they have such a fragile, porous skeleton, it's important too when you're moving them around, fragging them or anything of that sort, that you take good care of these corals. Another thought to think of too as well, when you're adding in these corals into your tank, you want to understand the colors that you're adding into your system. You're trying to understand and find the right placements for these corals, so it's good to understand the flow, the lighting of that area, and also is the color contrast going to work well in your aquascape. This is a little side tip and note whenever you're getting ready to add any new corals into a tank at home. All right, it's time for my favorite part of all of these coral highlight videos. Let's walk around the farm, let's pick out our top shelf favorites, let's get to know them a little bit better, and let's see some money shots. Easily one of our most well-known corals that we have here at Top Shelf Aquatics is the TSA Laffy Taffy. This is a Bernardipora that has really started to take off here in the farm, has become a fan favorite. In smaller frags, you can see the tentacles holding nice and tight to the skeleton, but when this one grows out and puts out to a colony size, the sweeper tentacles can really show some absolutely spectacular coloration. The contrast of the bright orange and yellow polyps compared to the violet purple stalks that are shown when they extend out is truly a unique color contrast. Hints of green are seen throughout the coral as well. Overall though, this is easily one of the nicest corals we have at the Top Shelf Aquatics farm, and if it's one you haven't picked up from us, this is a TSA signature. I think everyone should have their reef tank at home. A really nice Bernardipora that we have available as well is the TSA Raspberry Limeade. With its brilliant yellow mouth and raspberry red polyps and stalks, this can be a really nice splash of vibrant color to any reef tank. Like we mentioned earlier about these corals, and as you can see on some of these mini colony tiles here in the farm, they're really starting to encrust out and they're starting to get nice and settled in. Now let's talk about a truly aquaculture Goniopora we have here on our hands, and that has been in the farm for an extended period. Now we're going to be talking about the TSA Rose Petal Goni. The blue body that transitions into pinkish rose colored polyps is really a nice color combo, but what's very cool about this coral is it can transition through time. So it's going to be showing one color, and over the course of maybe a couple months it may transition, show more of the pink, or maybe show more of the blue. So this is something really cool to see in the coral whenever you add it into your system. I mentioned this in several videos whenever we talk about our aquaculture corals, but there's not enough appreciation for these corals in their fully grown colony size, rather than the frag sizes we technically usually see as hobbyists. It's nice to be able to showcase these corals in a larger colony size throughout the course of these videos. Another unreal Goni that we're going to be adding to our list is the Grandmaster Goniopora. The bright green color with the gold highlights makes this a standout coral in any tank. Anytime I walk around in the farm and I step by the section of Grandmaster Gonis, I'm distracted easily and I end up hanging out there for quite some time. Recently, we snagged one and put it into the Studio Reefer 250. If you haven't seen that on one of our last videos here on the channel, be sure to check that one out. The polyps are brilliant with their transition from green to gold with some nice blue tips at the end. Absolutely a Goni that anyone should grab if they're collecting them in their reef, or better yet, if you're looking to add a Goni into one of your systems. The last one we'll highlight today, and another slick Alveopora we're going to add to our list, is going to be the TSA White Tip Alveopora. This is one that grows extremely well for us here at TSA and has a different coloration that you don't normally see in corals. Especially when you talk about white in corals, that's usually a bad sign, but for this coral, it's really a nice and unique opposite side of looking at things. The white striking color can be a really nice addition to any reef tank at home, and I think if you're looking to add an algae to a tank, this is definitely one you should consider picking up. If any of these flower pot corals piqued your interest and you want to add them into your reef tanks at home, be sure to head over to our website now, browse our entire collection of Gonis, Alveopora, Bernardopora, the entire flower pot selection. And if there's a specific one you saw on the video that we didn't mention, be sure to drop a comment down below asking me what it is, or shoot us a message over on Instagram, or send us an email. Whether it be Goniopora, Bernardopora, or Alveopora, any of our corals in the flower pot coral group, we love having them here at Top Shelf Aquatics, actively aquaculturing them so we can provide them to every single one of you at home watching these videos, whether it be the movement, the coloration, or everything in between. If you guys are looking to grab any of the corals we talked about today, or shop our entire collection of flower pot corals, head over to our website now and snag them up. If you guys have hung out all the way till the end, I want to say thank you so much. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so you don't miss out on any future uploads.